Welcome to Evolving on Purpose with Matt Swartz. This podcast is where real leaders share the inner work behind their breakthroughs and where you'll find the tools and stories to work through whatever is holding you back from who you're meant to be so you can make the impact you're here to make and help change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Evolving on Purpose podcast. I am here back with Mandy Diseno, and Mandy has been brave enough to come back on for a second episode, which is going to be a coaching episode. The goal of these coaching episodes is so that you guys can get a sense, for those of you who maybe haven't done a lot of coaching or therapy, or maybe some of you that have, but it's left a bad taste in your mouth. Maybe you didn't find the right person. Maybe it wasn't the right situation. To give you a glimpse of what I think this can look like for people, so that if you are struggling, if you are suffering, you don't have to stay in the darkness. You can kind of come out into the light and maybe get some help so that you're not doing alone. Leaders, high performers, perfectionists, we love to try to figure it all out ourselves. So I guess, maybe before we get started, a good place, Mandy, if you're up for talking about it, you had shared last episode that you've done some therapy, you've done some coaching. So would you be willing to share kind of some of, your experiences of when you've sought that out and why you've sought that out, and maybe what some of those experiences have been like for you?
Yeah, I'd be willing to share. I know that there's sort of like this mystifying idea of what therapy is, and I think finally there's more of an experience of people are open to exploring therapy, talking about therapy, reaching out for help. And I think I kind of grew up in that time frame where we didn't go to therapy. We didn't go to seek counseling. We didn't do any of those things. And so I don't know as if I had an aversion to it, or I didn't really know where to go or how to seek that out. And so I got a divorce. I moved into a house all by myself. I was in a relationship with somebody for 25 years, married for 20 years, moving into a house by myself. I quit my entrepreneurial experiences, closed my businesses, things like that, and went to work. And so in the divorce, I also divorced friends too. So kind of starting completely over. New job, not being an entrepreneur anymore, no husband, new house, not the same friend group. And I just was in a place of like really not knowing what my future would hold and how I might be able to find more of a compelling future. I grieved a lot with all of those losses, but I also grieved a future that I thought I was going to have, which is kind of a weird thing to grieve, something that you are forward thinking, actually grieving something that is not yet attainable or yet attained. And so luckily, I actually went to work for an organization that was very big into helping people. I actually went to work for a nonprofit that was mainly based in hospice care. And so in working in that organization, it was very common to talk about, are you struggling? We've got help for you. People in the community who are struggling with death or some type of loss, this is where they come. And what a beautiful thing for me to experience working for this organization and having that so available. Part of our benefits too were that you could go and you could seek a therapist or counseling or a coach, and it was free and confidential and all of that kind of thing. So I'm not sure, Matt, exactly when that transition happened, but I was like, why am I not seeking help? Yeah. And I have no excuse not to. It's right here at my fingertips. It's free. It's confidential. It's part of the culture that I now work in. And so I just kind of eeny, meeny, miny, moed it in the list of people. And luckily I just I found the most loving and caring, wonderful person that she's still very close with me, and I'm grateful that I met her. Her name is Amy, and she helped me through so much.
That's amazing. So you had, in your early life until, kind of your, life broke apart, you'd never gone to therapy or coaching before that. This was the activation for you.
Yeah, I had never gone, although I grew up in a town that it was very common, and I knew people who were psychotherapists and things like that, and who had written books. And I remember I babysat for this couple that was a psychotherapist. So they were psychotherapists. So I didn't have any aversion to it. I just didn't ever seek it out for myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a really important and good place to start because, I'm, at the worst, there are people with an aversion, but a lot of people, is it just, no, I don't need that, or, I got other things going on, or, any of that, right? Like there's plenty of reasons that people don't seek out support that aren't just, I mean, it can absolutely be more than aversion.
Right.
And I mean, there have been times in my life, like I was just out of social work school. I was having panic attacks. It was not my first, that was not my first gut answer to the problem. But I'm, I have my master's degree. This is what I'm doing every day. Right. So, what's going on with that? And I think I think there's different reasons, and it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
So it sounds like for you, the turning point really was that culture, which makes sense, right? When you're in a culture of helping and you're in a culture of getting help, right? It's, that can make a big difference. So I'm glad that was a good turning point for you.
I think something else is kind of interesting and that came to my mind as you were speaking, and that was that, your whole podcast is about these individuals who are high achievers, and we always kind of think I'm good, I don't need that. And I think about when I was in my marriage and how I was so struggling and I was suffering so badly. And yet I wouldn't even admit to myself how much I was struggling and the feelings that I was having. And so that would have been an ideal time for me to seek help. And I didn't even want to admit that I had those feelings. So there does have to potentially, for some people, have that turning point in order for them to wake up and say, like you did, I'm having these panic attacks. Why am I not seeking help for this? And we just push through. We're okay. We've got it. We're all right.
Yeah. I think, and there's a lot of layers there, but I think, it can be fear of weakness. It can be, that need, identity focused in a sense of power and control, or it can be the uncertainty of what that experience would look like. So I think there are a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
One question I would ask would be, in you seeking out help and doing all that, are there, in the therapy and coaching that you've had so far, are there one or two things that stick out as man, these are some of the most valuable things that I've gained in this process so far?
One thing that sticks out is something that Amy had asked me. It was far into our therapy, maybe years, or maybe lots and lots of sessions. And she asked me, she didn't say to me, she asked me, Mandy, do you love yourself? Whew, man, that was such an eye-opening experience, because it was no, I don't think so. Here I'm sabotaging myself every night by drinking myself to sleep. I hate my job. I'm lonely. I don't know where I'm going in life. I'm overweight. No. The honest answer was no. And so that really opened up a new level of exploration for me to figure out what's going on here, and how, and she helped me through that, of course.
Yeah. Powerful question, right?
Yeah.
But you have to, the same question, even if it's the same person, I see these people there's people I've seen for 10, 12 years, right? The same question asked a year later, 2 years later, I couldn't hear what you were asking then, right? Our brains will block out. If I can't deal with the pain underneath that question, right? I'll yeah, I'll block it out. And I didn't hear you. And then 2 years later, like, do you really love yourself? Oh my God, I can't believe you're like, we already talked about this. What do you know, but like, it has to do with the moment and the person. And so, important for you to acknowledge, I think, whatever work that you had done, on your own before any of that, or through the process with Amy thus far, that allowed you to hear that. And really, because that's, I don't know how it could get much heavier, right?
Right.
That's pretty heavy.
Right. Yeah. And really, for whatever reason, at that point, it was like, oh my gosh, wow. We've been dancing and tiptoeing around all of these things, but, let's get down to the root of what's really happening here.
Yeah.
And how you're
which is now informing your work, right? Like, because you said so much of your work is, right, really going to, it's really focusing on that. Okay, how these habits, ultimately are the ways of showing self-love, right? So that all ties together for you.
Yeah. And really bringing yourself back to yourself. You talk about how, you're finding yourself or discovering your new self, and both are bringing yourself back to who that person is, or rediscovering who that person is that you knew was there all along, but you didn't pay enough attention to. And I think those micro habits and the work that my book walks people through is really about rediscovering, knowing you're already enough, but rediscovering what's important to you, and finding that way to bring yourself that self-love that through those little micro habits.
Yeah. So I think what you're talking about is some awareness around the parts of us that we've left behind, or the parts of us that we've disconnected from. Is that a fair way of framing parts of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what did you discover about the parts of you that you had left behind?
I discovered that I had slowly, I think this feels like so cliche, I had slowly just lost parts of who I was, for a variety of different reasons. We do that in relationships. We do that in being a mom. We do that in caring for our elderly parents. We lose parts of who we are because we are experiencing things and having to sort of modify or change what we would typically do because we're caring for others. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's when you completely lose yourself and have no sense of identity, in my opinion, when it becomes a really toxic situation. But I think over time, just, you're in a relationship and he likes one thing and you don't necessarily like that, but you want to spend time with him, or you want to please him, or you want to, X, Y, Z. And so you kind of forget, oh yeah, I can sacrifice that piece of me. Just like tiny habits building, little sacrifices over time, and you've lost who you are and your identity and really what's important to you and all of the parts and pieces of who you are.
Yeah. I think it's really important. Part of what you're saying is, I always try to, I'm a big frameworks guy, and I create these frameworks to try to make things super easy for people. One of my things is there's really only 3 stress responses, and it's control, people pleasing, and avoidance, right? And it's some combination of that, right? And, I think what you're talking about is that those of us who, the positive way to say it is caregive, right? The negative way to say it is people please, right? Yep. That as a response to stress, whether it's conflict in a relationship or, parenting or too much going on or trying to, whatever it is, right? That when we default to that people pleasing, when we default to that pattern over time, right? We're trying to make others happy. We're trying to be helpful, right? And we're gaining a sense of purpose or a sense of identity from doing that. Yeah. But then along the line, we slowly, lose these parts of ourselves that, you know, have particular preferences and have particular, you know, I'd say big word, cliche word, purpose, right? Like these parts of me, you know, I watch my kids, right? And I'm like, there are just these things that are true about them. Yeah. You know, like my oldest is a sports kid and my middle is like a builder. Like he just would sit and do Legos or art forever, right? And it's just like, well, there they are, right? And like if I can help them keep those threads for a while, you know, and see, you know, support them and where they go, right? I think that's the best thing I can do as a parent, because that there they are, right? And that's, again, I'm not trying to like, and now you have to grow up and be an architect. Like, well, no, that can be just as damaging, right? Like, but I think we all have these seeds in childhood of you know, before the world gets to us and molds us in particular threads. Does that feel true for you? Do you feel like part of the journey has been recapturing any of those things that you know, experienced or knew about yourself even when you were younger?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on. Control, people pleasing, and avoidance. I think all three were in play. You know, going back further, I grew up in a family that was kind of like, this is who you are, and this is who you're going to be, and this is how you behave. And I had an older brother who had some challenges in life. He was born without fingers on his hand, and so he was, you know, kind of he was the first grandchild. He was the favorite of everyone. He had a surgery to take a toe from his foot and put it on his hand so that he could grasp. And, you know, so there's a lot of reasons why he was the one who always got the attention. And so my go-to, knowing that my parents told me this was what I had to be, was that I just did anything and everything to please so that I could at least get some kind of breadcrumb of attention or love. And so for me, people pleasing equaled being loved.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
So going into a marriage and meeting somebody at 18, like, that was very much my go-to, is people please. And then of course, avoid uncomfortable things and just, you know, be people pleaser. And over a lifetime of that, you don't know who you are at the end.
Yeah.
And, you know, I could probably say that I really haven't known who I was until now. Because now, you know, I know what I like and what I don't like. I have boundaries. I'm okay with saying no. I don't always have to be that people pleaser. Now, am I somebody who enjoys that? Actually, yes. I enjoy being in situations where I help people feel comfortable, help them feel some kind of support or love. And I do that because that's just genuinely who I am and who I love to be, but not in a people-pleasing way any longer.
Totally. Yeah, I think, you know, with the stress or the trauma or the pain, whatever, right, distorts those core things about us, right? And what can be very important and purposeful can, you know, ultimately becomes a defense mechanism, which is to say we're doing it too much, right? And yeah, it's not that caring for people is bad, right? It's not like we don't want to go the other direction and lose the components of ourself. I always try to encourage people that inside the pattern, like there's pain, but there's truth, right? And so, you know, whatever it is, somebody's coming in with anxiety attacks, right? I'm like, okay, you know, I'm worried that I'm a bad mom. Take something generic, right? Like that. And there's a bunch of anxiety. What is inside that is true? Because there's probably something that is true. Not I'm a bad mom, but like, you know, it can be something very basic. Like there are ways in which my stress is causing me to not parent the way I want to parent. Okay, so then let's work on that, right? And so now we don't have to, the one extreme of I'm a bad mom, and then the other extreme of no, I'm just going to shove that down and not deal with it, right? That's not going to work. Neither of those are going to work.
Right.
So, you know, we're for you, it sounds like a lot of people pleasing inside that marriage, in order to make it work. And, there's an element of that that's like, yeah, well, what's true? Like, well, I want to be a collaborative partner. Like, great. We don't want to lose that, right? Like, you don't want to end up going so far the other direction that you're just, commanding what future relationships need to look like in a way that isn't authentic and true to you, right? We don't want to lose that.
Right. Yeah.
So along the road here, so how many years ago, like with the we can use like going to therapy as the original start of that. Like how many years ago was that for you?
The life implosion was maybe 8 years ago. And therapy came pretty soon after that. So yeah, maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
7 or 8 years. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of good time for healing and growth is 7 years. Cause I think it's important for people to kind of get a context of like, there's a big difference between like a year or two of therapy and coaching and like, 6 or 7 years, which isn't to say everybody needs, I'm not here to prescribe. One person needs this, one person needs that. Some people go to coaching for a temporary problem. That's cool. Some people end up in therapy for a while. That's cool. Nothing's right or wrong. But for you, there's been an investment along a journey. And, that's, clearly made an impact. At what point along that journey do you feel like you were in a place where it naturally started moving from I need most of this energy to like heal me? And when did it start moving into I have some of this extra energy to start thinking about what I can do for others?
I love that question. I would say only maybe like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an evolution. I had therapists and coaches, and I went through different programs. I went through a whole program to stop drinking alcohol. So I had different therapists and coaches there. So there's multiple different things that I was doing. We talked about Tony Robbins last time. I went through a bunch of different things with Tony Robbins and his coaches. And so there was a lot of different things, but like really, and I think I shared last time, really not until I could completely get rid of what I was doing every day to numb myself could I fully move into that next version of myself.
Yeah. It's layers, right?
Yeah.
Like the personal growth journey, the healing journey. And I often, for my clients, like I try to separate like healing and growth a bit, right? Like healing is working through and releasing some of the old stuff. Growth is, building and growing some of the new stuff, right? But like there's, especially in that healing journey, like, there's just layers, right? And so you've got your like, discernible negative behaviors on the surface that you're like, okay, yeah, I'm drinking way too much. And like, yeah, we got that. But then I start going inside as I peel back the layers. And I used it once upon a time. One of my early jobs was I was a substance abuse counselor. So I've been around the block a little there. It's not just about, so many people get stuck on just stopping the substance use, right? Because the next step is, but what was that covering up? Like, what do you not want to feel?
Yeah.
What are you confused about? What are you angry about? What are you guilty about? Right. And that's when it's like, okay, so now, next layer, right? And and then as we work through that, then there's like, well, what's beneath that, right? Does that make sense and ring true from your experience that there were some layers there that you had to work through?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I think with all of it, you can go down different, I'm going to say a rabbit hole, which is not really the idea, but like you dig here and you can dig a little bit deeper there and dig a little bit deeper there. And then that opens up something else that then, that triggers this idea and this feeling and those different things. And you open up and you learn something new about yourself that you didn't realize. So absolutely. I think it's an ever evolving process. And as we grow and change, something else might come up. And then it's like, oh, okay, there's some healing that needs to be done. Let's go back to the healing side and let's dig a little bit deeper there. itch that and scratch that and see what's coming to the surface and work through that so that we can then go back to the growth side and keep building there. So I think it's not just an onion. It's like multiple onions at the same time.
Totally. So, which then, might be a good segue into like today, right? And we went where we went, which is more like talking about some of the therapy and coaching, which is great because I think, again, just like there are a lot of people that need to hear about this, right? So I appreciate where you took it. Right now, today, what do you feel like is that? What is the thing or things that you feel like you're really working through? Like what feels like the next step for you as you're trying to put some of this work out there?
Some of the things that I've been working on are still boundaries. So I've been working with my coach on some boundaries. She has encouraged me. I kind of go to extremes. I'm kind of like an all or nothing and kind of an extreme person. So I'm like, I got to put down this boundary. And she's like, there's lots of different types of boundaries. You can have a porous boundary and still have that boundary, or you can just make a really hard boundary and you have nowhere to move with that boundary. So consider which type of boundary you're putting up and how that's going to affect the next steps or the next things that you do. And that was good for me to hear recently. So that's one thing. I should have prepared a little bit more.
You're good. Can I go off of that for a second? Yeah. So like, where have you seen that coming up for you? Like where has it been helpful to think about those different kinds of boundaries? How have you applied that?
Yeah. So this particular conversation came up in an experience, with a coworker and how they responded to something that had happened at work that I was involved in. And my response was, I want nothing to do with this person ever again. Where can I put in my resignation letter? And where am I going next? Because this is not acceptable. I do not want to be treated this way. And I now have no respect for this person any longer.
Yeah.
And that was my response. And it was such just a strong, visceral feeling in me of like, nope, no. Yeah. I know this feeling. I know this experience from my past, and
we're not going to go there again. I have mastered my life. I refuse to be treated this way. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And so that's where the conversation came around. It's good to have it. First of all, great job recognizing that response and not acting on that response immediately.
Yeah.
And good job bringing it to the session so we can talk about it. And then that's where the conversation went to. You can still have boundaries. You can put those boundaries in place, and maybe we don't have to call them a boundary. Maybe it's just, holding space for what you know to be true in your life. And it doesn't have to be such a harsh black or white boundary.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, you decided not to quit. It sounds like. But I think this is such a great example because, again, you're talking about some of these dynamics and again, I try to break it down really simply for people. So if you're out there, if you're a people pleaser, if you know this dynamic, right, it's very normal to be working on that people pleasing. And then you end up on this just other side of the pendulum where you're now like, nobody's ever gonna, and I hope my wife doesn't get pissed at me, but that has been something that, she's had to navigate. She spent a lot of time allowing people to walk all over her and then, became, fiercely strong and passionate about drawing healthier boundaries, which makes sense in the light of her journey. But, maybe there's some times where we might overcorrect, right? Because we are, trying to protect, whatever our inner child now, or we're trying to, stand up for who we are and we're trying to show ourselves love. But we have to be careful that, we're not just, swinging completely opposite direction. So it's great, right? So, it's not this big giant issue that you're dealing with, but you're able to go to your coach and you're able to say, hey, like here's this challenge. Here's how I'm feeling and responding. We're able to notice the patterns, to put it in context, and we're able to find some nuance, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's like, okay, 7 years in, right, to this kind of work, there's a lot more nuance to it. And mm-hmm. there's a lot more like subtlety to what we're examining and how we're examining it.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. And I think one of the things that you take with you over those years of going through coaching and therapy and doing different programs is, awareness is key. If we weren't aware, or if something didn't trigger us, or if something just didn't come to our awareness and we said, that's interesting, I'm curious about why I responded that way, or I'm curious about how that made me feel. If we weren't aware, then we would just go on with our lives. But I think that's what it teaches us to do, is just become aware of when something feels icky or off or just not quite right, and sitting in that and exploring that, instead of just like pushing it down or pushing it away or avoiding it. Instead, it's really spending some time in that place to discover who you are.
Yeah. There are, again, these frameworks that I use, and now is not the time for me to go into them, but, you're outlining, and you're outlining two things right now, and then I'm going to tie in a third thing that you've mentioned already. So like, first is that awareness, right? Like before anything else, the bread and butter of this, of this work, therapy, coaching, is awareness. If you don't have awareness, you can't go anywhere, right? Well, you can go places, but it's not gonna, you're not gonna be clear why you're doing it, right?
Right.
So that awareness is so important. And then comes the understanding, mm-hmm. which I do like to delineate, right? Awareness, mm-hmm. I'm present, I'm engaged, and then I can get curious, right? And then we go into, okay, why am I responding this way? What's the pattern? What's the context, mm-hmm. right? And so, you're kind of highlighting those two steps, right? Yeah. First, we become aware, then we ask some good questions, we get curious, we start understanding, okay, I see why I'm pushing back so hard in this circumstance, mm-hmm. right? One of the later stages is one that, we talked about in the first episode, which is that, like, what are my needs and how do I reach them? That, again, you have to have awareness to get there. Mm-hmm. Then you have to have understanding of yourself to be able to do that. So, the work that it sounds like you're doing with your program and your book, we want to identify those micro habits. But, what, for me, the thing I was thinking about as you were talking last time is like, okay, what needs are these habits serving, mm-hmm. right? And, a big one that you're focused on is that, caring for yourself, nurturing yourself, right? Self-compassion, self-love, which is absolutely a need, right? But all of these habits, if they're effective habits, are tied to a need. And, my like easy thing to say when it comes to, moving out of substance abuse, right, is that the substance abuse on some level fills a need, mm-hmm. and multiple needs, right? What is that? Is it comfort? Is it connection? Is it, what are these? And it's different for everybody, right? A social drinker is different than a solo drinker, filling different needs, right? A drinker is different than a smoker, filling different needs. And each person is different, right? Some people are using it to numb, and some people are using it for excitement, mm-hmm. right? So, everybody's different. But if we can figure out some of those underlying needs, right, then perhaps we can be more successful. And here's what you've been able to identify, just trying to tie this all together for people, because this is like, we've gone about this more conversationally, but I think it absolutely serves the purpose of a good coaching session, is that the thing that you identified early, which was, you identified about your early life, which was, I did what I needed to do to fit into my family system, which is to say, I figured out what I needed to do to get mm-hmm. love, right? Okay, so then, that's a big part of the need. And then you see that pattern repeating mm-hmm. consistently throughout, some of these challenges. Okay, well, I'm making this marriage work to get love. I'm drinking to try to, feel some sense of connection to myself, something in some way, right? And then eventually you're able to keep doing the work, and you keep stripping it down to its essentialism. And you're able to, create for yourself, and now ultimately for the people that you're trying to serve. Here's what it looks like to get that love need met mm-hmm. in a more positive, proactive way that is maybe not so, reliant on some of these negative patterns, that we're maybe getting 20, 30, 40% of that need met, but weren't effectively meeting the need long term.
Yeah. Wow, Matt, you did. You pulled it all together. You identified my younger life and why I did that, and now how it's become this passion of mine to bring into the world.
Yeah.
Good job. You're incredible.
Yeah. What I love, right, is that the threads are there and they're always there, and we have to find them. And if we can find them, then it makes those next steps so much easier, right? Like, how do we, because it's about you, but it's not about you. It's like, what about all those other little girls out there?
Yeah.
Right. That were just like, how many billions of them, right? Yeah. Just like you, right? Figuring out whatever they had to do in an environment where it's not that, they weren't, nobody was throwing rocks at them. No. Nobody was, right. Like, that's not what we're talking about. But what did I need to do and what did I need to be to get that love? Mm-hmm. And then now that I've begun unlocking some of this for myself, I can begin helping others to examine the same thing and finding it in a different way, because ultimately the joke, right, is that the better we get at self-love, the better, the more genuinely loving and collaborative relationships that we can find in the world, the harder that we try to get that love from other people, right? That in general, the less healthy those relationships end up being. Yeah. So it feels backwards initially, because we're like, oh, well, if I just find really, if I just give everybody that love, then they'll give it back to me. But we're missing the dysfunction in that pattern, right. And we're missing the opportunity. Again, it feels a little wiggly and abstract until you can make it tangible and experience it, which, that's the whole point of your program, I think, is like, okay, we can make this very tangible, right? Like, here are the little things. Let's do these little things. These little things add up over time. And then that turns into an experience where I'm feeling more of that love, right? Yeah. And then I start to watch, maybe, right? Like, things start to take shape in my external environment in a way that they weren't before. Is that fair?
I think that's absolutely fair. That's beautifully put. Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad that you were able to take the step of, not just the crisis itself, but the step where you were ready to go, okay, I'm ready for some help, sought out some therapy. You've been on this journey. You've gotten some, different help from different places. And now you're ready to give it to others. Yeah. So that's really incredible.
Yeah. And I think something that, I've been experiencing lately that I think is maybe worthy of saying to your listeners is that, so I'm exploring a new romantic relationship. And what I find interesting about him is he's very into therapy as well, but he's had lots of different therapists. So he's like, he didn't quite always mesh with the people. And I think that that's such an important thing. If we're brave enough to reach out and identify, yes, I do need help and I want to get help, it's okay if that particular person that you reached out to first is not the right fit. Try something else. And there's been a couple of people who I've had in my journey who just weren't the right fit, but it didn't mean that I stopped because they weren't the right fit. And so being brave enough to try again, even if there's some mismatch.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you sharing that for sure. And I think this is a good, I'll kind of round this out. I encourage my clients, I encourage people to call me. I'm like, shop, right? Like, I do a couple initial consultations, it's a sales process, right? Like, do we click? If not, no problem, right? Like, I don't want you here if this isn't going to feel good. I want you to find your person, your people. And that, just like we say about friends, like some friends are for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, right? Like, the same can be true with a therapist or a coach. Yeah. Like, there are coaches for reasons, there's coaches for seasons, and there's coaches for lifetimes. And I have been a therapist or a coach to people for a reason, for a season, and for a lifetime. And I love my lifetimers and I treasure my seasons, and those reasons that come in and come out, are great too. So, I think for the listener who, maybe you didn't have the best experience in therapy or coaching and you're looking for more. That's definitely one of the things that I want to activate people on is like, yeah, get out there, like try another couple of people, right? Ask your friends, like, how do I find it? I mean, we've got directories, Psychology Today, Google, any of these things, but I'm always a big fan of like, ask the people that you like the best because they probably know people that you would get along with better than anybody else. But some of us don't have those people to ask. And so there are different directories and different options available. But I think the message that we're trying to share here is like, don't give up.
Yeah.
Like if you had even 1, 2, experiences that weren't a good fit, there's other options out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, trust me, there are thousands and thousands of options out there. This is a saturated market. So, find your person and, don't let your growth be waylaid by, a singular or, just not the right relationship.
Right.
Because the possibility still exists.
Yeah. Yeah. That's important.
Cool. Well, Mandy, thank you so much for coming back. And thank you for, again, being vulnerable and sharing about your journey with coaching with therapy. And, I'm excited for, your continued work with Women in Bloom and just being able to share that, expression of the self-love that you have found by working through and healing some of those patterns that you became aware of.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you.